Welcome to another Hollywood Times Live.
All right. So Vincent's calling from Atlanta. And where are you, David? Atlanta?
I'm also down here in the South.
All right. So we got
Oh, really? What part?
Atlanta.
Where are you?
I'm in Metro Atlanta. I'm in Fayetteville, which is just outside the airport,
Yeah.
about 10, 12 miles.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm familiar. I understand.
Well, Darlene, you can chime in at any time, but I'll just go ahead and start. In your job, you see, grisly scenes and humanity at its worst. Do you have to numb yourself, numb your normal human emotions in order to do your job?
I say, yeah. I think David and I have over the years found a way to pack all that in because we're focused. If anyone ever tells you, hey, looking at someone who's been murdered, body riddled with bullets or stab wounds or some of the crazy things that we've seen, and it doesn't affect you, then they're absolutely lying. But I will say this: you get used to it, you become numb to it. It doesn't mean it doesn't go anywhere. It's all up in here, it's still in your head. But we're focused on trying to solve the crime. We deal with it in our own way. We have conversations. David and I have always talked about things, and and we're very real with each other and how we feel about things. Because we got to get that off our chest. We may not go home and take it to the house, to the wife or to your kids or whatever. But we have always had a good way of bouncing these things off of each other and putting them in a place. Compartmentalize it in a space that allows us to wake up the next day and do it again.
Do you have anything to add, David?
I would just say, the jury is still out. What happens to us after having seen all that? I know that since I've walked away from the police department after 33 years, since I was 20, 21 years old, that's all I did. And I worked in some of the neighborhoods where most of the murders occurred my first 15 years as a patrolman. Those last 19 years, I've seen everything. So I'm at the point now as a retiree, loving doing this project with TV1, ATL Homicide. Squirrels getting hit in the road bother me now. It's just, I'm hypersensitive to death. And I didn't see that coming. We were kind of desensitized to it. I had a house full of kids being raised. Me and Vin were always on the go, and things have slowed down. So it's time for it to wash over you. You got to stay spiritual.
Good. Do you enjoy your work, guys? Do you?
Yeah, I've never taken. I was a cop for 22 years. Never took an examination to get promoted. David and I had plenty of opportunities to become sergeants and lieutenants and captains and who knows, chief of police. But to do that, you've got to put your name on a list and be willing to take a test and get promoted. We were good with what we were. Homicide was what we were meant to do, and we were good at it. So every day, enjoy getting up. I mean, the hardest part is figuring out what tie to wear with the wet handkerchief. That was the hardest part every day. After we got through that, the rest is easy. Grab a cup of coffee, hit the office, see what we got, and then hit the streets. I mean, every day was like the first day.
I have a question. What made you, was it your family who got you involved in this, Vincent, or, your attraction to this particular type of crimes?
I will say a little bit on both sides. So, my family, I don't come from, not even middle class. I mean, we were, basically poor, but I always had food on the table. There were people in my family who went to prison. So I experienced the other side of law enforcement as a child and growing up and understanding how that affects families. And then my older brother, I kind of followed in his footsteps. He became an FBI agent. Different type of law enforcement, not solving homicides, And I've always been pulled in that direction. And I had a life-changing career, a career-changing life experience in my 90s. My son was born, and I just couldn't continue doing what I was doing. I was fixing airplanes for a major airline. I was licensed by the FAA. I did everything I had to do. So in all accounts, I made it. Like in that industry, like you made it to the cream of the crop, and I hated it. Hated going to work every day. So I took a 75% pay cut with a brand new kid and a hell of a chance, hoping I made the right decision, and never looked back.
What about
David?
you? What about you, David? Can you answer that question?
I wanted to be a cop since I was about 4 years old. I walked around with a cap gun in my back pocket when I was a kid. I idolized, these police officers in my neighborhood. They had the respect. They walked the beat. I'm from tiny Wilmington, Delaware, but it's a busy little city in the 70s when I was coming up. Saw a lot of my cousins getting thrown into the paddy wagon, and I just wanted to do the other side. And 2 years after high school in 1985, I went down the Atlanta Police Department and said, I'm ready to go. And, I was able to, being really immature, my first full-time job ever, I came on this police department. It blew my mind. It was the greatest job ever. It was the greatest adventure every day, even as a patrolman for 15 years in those housing project neighborhoods. I loved it. And so that just translated into, when me and Vince are grown men, because I was a boy. By the time we're grown men, we meet and we go to Homicide the very same day we made Detective. It was like, Vince is my at-work wife. I mean, we worked so close together. And then you're with somebody for 8 hours a day forever, 17, 19 years working murder. We got a lot of secrets. We got a lot of things, so.
We joke that we were together than many people who were married. If you look statistically in America, divorce, this guy and I have had a longer relationship. That's sad, but it tells you what, the respect and admiration we have for each other.
Well, to follow up on Darlene's question, I want to, you sort of already alluded earlier about not bringing it home, you're not bringing your work home. Is there any circumstance that with your family, or do you do you leave it all at the office? And just to me, being a working gal myself, it's hard to leave it all at the office. Do you use your home as an escape from the horrors that you see every day? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think we both found comfort in our families, going home, and they know, a little bit different situation. Dave's married to a police officer. She's retired as well. I was a single father. And of course, I don't want to go home and tell my young son about what I saw that day. But at the same time, I want him to understand this is the real world. And there are bad people out there that will hurt you. So some of it was a lesson in life with some insulation around that, to not make it so, I didn't want him to be so frightened that he didn't want to go outside. But yeah, it was like, you get in, you close the door, you're making dinner for your son, helping him with homework, and you're not thinking about everything else that's going on until he goes to bed. Now, when he goes to bed, the wheels start turning again. I used to keep a pen and a pad. I mean, we're going old school before people use digital notes next to my bed, because I literally would have dreams that would become waking thoughts about cases. And I would literally have ideas in the middle of the night, and I would write them down because I wouldn't remember them when I woke up. And I'd look at my pad and like, oh, wow, I need to go check this guy's garbage. Or I need to go, check the Amtrak train schedule, because you know what, maybe he took a train instead of a bus. All that stuff comes to your mind when you're trying to turn this stuff off.
Is it kind of like a journal? A journal? Would you, for these thoughts, and when you hit them at a time, when it's your rest time, are you at home? So do you, is it a journal, or you just write it on paper?
Paper.
And did either of you get involved with forensic science, with, you know, that's the real
Oh yeah.
part of, you know, with the death and all them, you know, not just the criminal, but what they've done.
Say Vince, he can speak on that. He was the guy, you know, street cop, but he had a lab coat he kept, you know, in the trunk of the car every day. He was next level when it came to the forensics, because we watched all that happen. DNA, as we were detectives in homicide, it was just becoming what it is today. I mean, we came in the year 2000, so we got to see that evolution, and Vince jumped all over it. I was in them sidewalks. I stayed in the streets, and you know, that's why it was such a perfect marriage, because we had the whole city covered. We had the science and we had the streets. And Vince was handling things technologically speaking, and with the advent of DNA, I mean, he was rocking and rolling with that. And he's one of the foremost, you know, people. He teaches that stuff, and it was all Greek to me. I was just, I'm just a regular, I'm the Blue Knight dude, and it just wasn't my forte. But my dude, he's the one that handled that end of our work.
And we were never ones to try to depend too much on many people. So to answer your question forensically, when we start looking at cases and how science starts changing and how we need to start using science, not that I'm a biologist by any means, but I have to know what the right questions to ask. So I had to educate myself in DNA, PCR DNA versus RFLP DNA, what that means, what STR DNA is, what does mitochondrial DNA mean? What am I looking for in a cold case when it's a homicide victim that was raped? What technology existed in the 90s that we may have to rework today? And we started solving not just cold cases, but current cases. We looked at cell phone technology when nobody was looking at it in law enforcement. I have a phone, like if I'm using my phone, let me call the phone company. What happens? Explain this to me like I'm a fifth grader. What does it mean? Well, a signal comes out of your phone and it hits that big thing in the sky called a cell tower, and it leaves a signature there. I said, so that means my phone number should be on that tower somehow. How do I get that information? So now we started doing cell phone tower mapping, longitude, latitude, all those things that are so common now. In the early 2000s, we were asking those tough questions.
So it made your job easier with this new technology, you know, and been an effective deterrent. I mean, that was actually one of my questions, so I'm glad you touched on that.
Certainly, absolutely made our job easier. It made us, again, we're asking the right questions. So when you have a suspect in a box and you say, hey, Dave, go in there, ask him this question, and Dave does his magic, say, hey, man, were you anywhere near, 123 Main Street on this particular day? No. Bam, phone records. Now explain how was your phone there if you weren't there? So that technology caused people to say, well, okay, I was there, but what had happened? I just drove the car. So now we're making some progress. Now we're on the road to the truth. If you were just driving a car, who's the shooter? Maybe you are the shooter, but now you put yourself at the crime scene. So without that technology and you're forcing someone's hand, it's a battle of wills at that point. So it made it way easier.
Darlene, I see your wheel spinning. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. The public, they, well, we read books. We read fictional books on the most part. There are non-fictionals that are really quite weird when they come in with the pictures of actual people, that they're not, it's, you know what I'm talking about. They're, it's a nonfiction book. And a lot of people, read fiction of this nature. And the misconception, what's the misconception about from what is said and nonfiction versus fiction?
As opposed to as far as books are concerned, as opposed to the show. I mean, I don't know how much you guys have read. I'm sure you've read a lot because you're professionals. But that was sort of, to bounce off of her thoughts is like, what skill sets are required to be a good homicide investigator?
I just think someone that's curious, someone that doesn't take no for an answer. And, I think you've got to know the community you're serving. It's all about service. And if you haven't laid that groundwork before you get, made detective and you get the gold badge, you're going to be unsuccessful. There's only so many cameras and phone record cases you're going to make. Sometimes you got to sit down and talk to these humans and they got to tell you the story because, murders happen in the blink of an eye. And you just, preparation is having known your community. You legitimize when you walk back into that part of the town, that part of the city, and people start telling you things. Because some murders, we still have eyewitness testimony. I mean, I know that a lot of these, TV dramas and some of these news magazines have showed that witness identifications are bad and not reliable. They're still reliable. We were making those cases, in the 2010s, still with eyewitnesses. As long as we backed up those eyewitness statements with factual evidence, we put them in places through technology to verify they're actually at these scenes and watching these crimes. I just think that I hope that policing doesn't lose its curiosity. You've got to be out there, and you got to be out there, in our opinion, before the crime happens. People have to have respect for you. That's why a lot of guys, that work in homicide, they don't get a lot of good results back from the public because they didn't plant their flag there years before and have a reputation that could be trusted.
Well, congratulations on the show. It's in its third season and it's been very successful. And, can you talk a little bit about, and I want to, before I go on, I want to welcome Jalila. I know she's got her camera off and her she's muted, but
hey girl.
Jalila, hey babe, nice to see you again.
I know you too, honey. Thank you, and I love the interview. They got
Cool.
just so you know, they got a 4:00.
Okay, we're about to wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you though for that, and thank you guys for taking the time with Darlene and I, and really appreciate it. There's so much talk today about institutional racism in law enforcement. Have you seen or experienced that yourself?
Man, have we seen it on both sides? I'll tell you a quick story. I'll make it really quick. When I was a young cop and my son was probably 4 or 5, we get out of the car in a predominantly Latin community in Atlanta, and 2 white police officers, one in particular, as we walk into the convenience store trying to get my attention, yells out, "Amigo, come over here." And my blood boiled. So to make a long story short, those 2 officers got a lesson that day. Once I produced my identification to show them what I did for a living and to tell them how inappropriate that was. So on that end, that's just one example of, as a civilian. But yeah, institutional racism, systemic racism exists within law enforcement. It has for a very long time. And you can see the amount of service that's provided to marginalized and disenfranchised communities, and not just Atlanta, but other major cities. It's an example of that. So it's not just personal interaction, but it's policy. I can go on. I can. You just pressed a pressure point for me because I talk about this a lot. So it's got to start from the top, from resources to funding to budgets to programs that are available to people in these communities. But then you have police officers that make it in the ranks that are just straight racist. They are racist, and we've seen it, and they treat people differently, and it's not right. So, we haven't seen a lot of it because they know Dave and I, we're telling.
Do you? That's very well put on this layman's person over here. But do you ever find it where the police will communicate more with those less fortunate, biracial or what have you? Not even that, but there's so many out there. Do you find the communication between law enforcement and the potential criminal, maybe not using the right words, where they're joining forces more. I know that we just had that whole thing, with the Capitol and all that, but do y'all, either of you?
That they want to peek through. What has to happen, in my opinion, I think these police departments have to become less tactical, less paramilitary. I mean, they look like stormtroopers going into these neighborhoods. When I hit the street in 1986 in the summer, I was issued a 38 six-shot revolver and my wits. You can't kill everybody. And this was Uzi City back in those days. Crime was rampant in the 80s. And we got a whole lot done because we won one street, one neighborhood at a time. It's all about interpersonal communication with the people you serve. They got to go back to that. There's a wall up, and we all know there's two different police departments. You got the one for the black and the brown. You got the one for everybody else. And so it can be done, but I think police departments, I'm not going to say be defunded, but they got to be reimagined. They got to be reimagined. And you got to, it's a lot of lip service and a lot of, window dressing that goes on in terms of reaching the community. The community knows who's out there. And now those are going to be your witnesses, the people that actually, the indigenous that live out there. It can be done because I had a great time as a young patrolman with only 6 chances in my gun for years.
Good way to put it. I know Jalila's going to get on my case if I don't let y'all go, but I just want to thank you, and maybe we'll do a follow-up interview because I know Darlene and I both had some more questions, and you've been wonderful to take your time with us. So is there anything you'd like to say to close it out?
What's that?
Anything you want to say to close this out? Congratulations on the show, and we'll keep watching.
Hey, I applaud y'all for the show, and I hope that it continues on. As far as publicity, and of course, is very important, and to get the word out there of what you guys are doing, I think is very important. We get caught up in a lot of the other cop shows that are out there, but this is a new spark, I think, for the world.
Thank you so much.
Darlene.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
All right, you guys be safe.
Well, can you guys mention either David or Vince when the show comes on, and just kind of
yes, please
give the final wrap up.
The final wrap up.
We want everybody to watch ATL Homicide every Monday at 9/8 Central, only on TV1.
That's it. Yeah.
And then also you need to know that they do a talk back. Can you mention about that, Vince? They do a talk back every Monday with their fans. Go ahead.
Yeah, so every Monday for the next 5 episodes, we did 8. We have a talk back live. It comes on at noon on TV1's Facebook, and we're going to give you tips on how to think like a detective. So tune in to TV1's Facebook page every Monday, and we're going to talk about the episode that's going to air that night. And then we're going to chop it up, and we allow the viewers to think like we think and try to help us solve this case. And then you can tune in at 9 o'clock and see what we're talking about. We give you just a little bit extra that you're not going to see the episode.
I love that. That's such a great idea, guys.
I'd like to get you on the Today Show if I could too. If I had the connections, I sure as hell would.
Yeah, well, you need to.
Yeah.
Call me, Miss Friend.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you.
Jalila. Bye, guys.
Thank you, sweetie. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
We thank you for watching and suggest you subscribe to this channel for the next Hollywood Times Live.